All right, well, welcome everyone. Today is Holy Tuesday, and we are going to be talking about Jesus cursing the fig tree.
Right.
I mean, two weird things there that I don't often say. Curse and fig tree.
Right.
But tell us why we should be very excited about this.
This is probably one of the more strange stories in the Holy Week narrative, and an interesting thing to focus on for an entire day.
Sure.
Different religious traditions kind of lump this in with the temple cleansing, and that's probably they celebrate both the cleansing of the temple and the cursing of the fig tree in the same day.
Yeah, because they have similar themes.
They have very similar themes,
Yep.
and I think that's the most important thing for people to understand about the fig tree is that it's not a tutorial on how to throw mountains into the ocean to wither your own fruit trees in your backyard, but it's actually about the temple and everything that Jesus has done already. So that's the big idea that's happening.
So then, if we're saying that you're going to want to understand the fig tree in light of what's just occurred at the temple.
That's right.
Why don't you give us a quick synopsis of what just happened in the cleansing of the temple?
Yes. So we talked about on Palm Sunday how Jesus had spent his entire ministry proclaiming that he was the king of life over death.
And he was doing that, we said, through his miracles.
Raising Lazarus from the dead. And as this king who has the power over death, he comes, rides into Jerusalem on a donkey, the beast of kings, to challenge the imperial establishment of Rome and the religious establishment of Israel and say, I've come to do something new. Tearing down your old kingdoms, I'm tearing down these old religious institutions, and I'm building something new in myself.
Yeah.
And so he's coming, challenging the powers that be, saying, I'm setting up something new. I'm a new sacrifice. I'm a new temple. I'm a new king. All the people in power are getting mad. And then Jesus walks away from the temple with his disciples.
Okay. And he walks out and he comes up on a fig tree.
That's right.
That has a leaf.
Yeah, he sees it from a distance.
It's in leaf.
And he sees a whole bunch of leaves on it.
And he's like, oh, I'm a little hungry after I just built a whip and made a prophetic stance in the temple.
Yes.
I'm going to go grab some fruit from this tree.
That's right. And as he walks up to it, he finds no fruit on it. And he says, I curse you, fig tree, wither and die. Now, depending on which gospel writer you read, Mark, for example, puts that story before Jesus goes into the cleansing of the temple and then records what happens next afterwards.
Right.
So you actually read the cursing of the fig tree as an analogy for or a metaphor for what he's doing in the temple.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other gospel writers will just put it all together.
Yeah.
Curses the fig tree, and then it withers down to the root immediately. It's kind of intense. So the question's always like, why on earth would Jesus do this?
Right. It's like, I've heard some people say, like, is he just mad? Is he hangry that he didn't get lunch that day?
Right.
It's like, no, he's doing a lot of what he did in the temple. He's making a prophetic metaphor, a prophetic demonstration, and he's communicating a truth.
Yes. So he's placing himself intentionally in line with a whole bunch of the Old Testament prophets.
Okay.
So if you go back and read the Old Testament prophets, what you'll find is one of the most common metaphor the major and the minor prophets have for the corrupted religious institution of the temple is of like an infertile fruit tree or an infertile vine. Micah 7's really famous in this regard. Micah is lamenting the state of Israel. He's like, I'm looking around like a fruit picker after the harvest. I find nothing
on the vine.
Nothing on the vine. No justice is being done. Everything is being abandoned.
Right. I came to a place that's supposed to be bearing fruit, and I found no fruit.
So the idea of something that's supposed to be bearing fruit but isn't is a common metaphor among the prophets for a corrupted religious institution. So what Jesus is doing in this moment is he is making physical, real, and living, or dead in this case,
an old literary metaphor.
A metaphor the prophets have used for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
So when he curses the fig tree, he's claiming that just like the prophets of old, Israel's religious institution, the temple itself, is corrupt. And I am cursing it.
Okay.
I'm ending it.
So what would you say then is the fruit that he was expecting, or that God has always been expecting to be on the tree of Israel?
Yes.
And why is it not on the tree?
Yeah, the Old Testament prophets kind of have a whole bunch of different things, but probably the best categories is like loving God and loving people.
That's a good one.
So like the priests were meant to facilitate a loving relationship with God through sacrifices, and that was being subverted for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to love others by being the administrative center for justice in the land of Israel.
Right.
And that failed in the Old Testament. And similarly, the religious establishment of Jesus' day
was failing also.
Yeah, they were failing as well. They were not doing justice to the poor of the land, nor were they loving God rightly. And so Jesus is saying, your time is up.
Yeah.
The temple institution must fall.
It's interesting, the use of fruit and like barren trees and everything like that throughout the history of Israel as a prophetic symbol for this, because one of the original tasks given to the people of God was to be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah,
right. To be fruitful was what it meant to be in God's image and to take that image around the world. And so obviously it's like, okay, this is your original commission, Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. Let me check back in on my people. How are they doing? Well, they're not being fruitful.
Yeah.
So it makes sense of the metaphor.
Yeah, there's more. There's layers, like all the way back to Genesis.
Right.
Like what is a tree and what is fruitfulness in God's covenant plans throughout all of human history.
Right.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is the people of Israel are supposed to be a light to the nations, right? They were supposed to,
particularly the temple establishment. The temple itself was supposed to be this place where people from all over the world could thank God, have a relationship with God, be forgiven by God, like worship God, have access to Him. But because of the practices the religious establishment during Jesus' day had set up, that had become increasingly difficult, particularly for Gentiles, as we talked about last time. But also, they were not a great lot of people in general, in some ways.
Yeah. So when Jesus curses the fig tree, for it not being fruitful, because it's Israel, the tree is Israel, and it's not bearing fruit.
The tree is the temple.
The tree is the temple,
in my understanding.
Okay.
Because what he does in the second here is he curses it. And the disciples also misunderstood what was going on. They didn't quite get what Jesus was doing, and they just asked him, how did you do this thing? How did the tree wither so quickly? And then Jesus responds with a really famous passage, but also a very cryptic passage, which is, truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but you can also say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea and it will be done.
Right.
And most people, when I grew up reading that, I assumed this mountain was any old mountain.
Any obstacle that you want moved, you can, in faith, pray and it'll get out of your way.
But I think the better way to read this is Jesus is referring to the mountain the temple sits on.
The Temple Mount.
The Temple Mount.
Yep.
And he just said,
still there today.
This corrupt religious institution I've already said it's going to be torn down in 3 days.
Yep.
And I am asking you, my disciples, to join me by praying for its destruction, by praying for the end of this corrupted sacrificial system, this corrupted temple, and this hamstrung way in which my people are no longer allowing all the nations of the world to come and accept, to experience
in the same
presence.
way that Jesus looked at the fig tree as a symbol of the temple and said, may no fruit ever come from you again.
That's right.
He's saying, you too, my disciples, can do works like this.
Yes.
Meaning you'll be able to speak to this temple that's sitting right there on this mount in front of you.
Yes.
And say, may no fruit come from you again.
Yeah.
And it will be done.
Yes.
Meaning, and it says that this mountain will be thrown into the sea.
Yeah.
Right? Which is really pictorial Jewish language, because the Temple Mount was a picture of the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
It was the place that God created.
Yeah.
And to be thrown into the sea was to go back into uncreation.
Yeah,
all
chaos.
The chaos of the waters. He's like, we're going to take the Garden of Eden and throw it back into uncreation.
And often the sea would also refer to like other foreign nations and foreign powers.
Yep.
So to be thrown into the sea would be to be thrown against the powers of the world.
Which is how it was destroyed in 70.
In 70 AD. That's right. So what I think is kind of the fun way to imagine what Jesus is saying here is he's just done all these prophetic actions in the temple. He's critiqued the current temple leadership. He said he's building a new temple and a new sacrifice himself. And then as he's walking out, he turns to his disciples and says, okay, I'm going to curse this fig tree as a living picture of what I want you to do alongside me. If you have faith alongside me, if you pray that this temple will be thrown into the sea, you'll see the temple destroyed. You'll see these corrupt religious institutions finally brought down, and a true temple and a true sacrificial system finally brought about. Through your faith and through your prayers, you can join the rebellion against the religious and political status quo and join my kingdom.
That had to have seemed, and you can guess by some of the narratives that come after this, and even some of the questions that the disciples themselves ask. it would have seemed like such a strange thing to invite a faithful Jew into.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why on earth would it be good news for them to take the household of God and throw it to the chaos monsters of the other nations or uncreation? Or why would they want to see the temple destroyed? Why would this be a rebellion that they want to, join in on? Because I feel like now we hear this as like millennial disenfranchisement people. We're like, yeah, join the rebellion, overthrow the religious political system. Let's
burn
do
all
it.
churches, right?
Yeah, it's like for them, they'd be like, I don't want that to happen.
No, this is where I meet God. This is the only way I know how to receive forgiveness or to interact with God at all.
The covenant almost hinges on this place. Why are we throwing it into the sea?
That's right.
So, like, why did Jesus invite Jews who would have been skeptical of that into such a prayer to pray in faith that the temple would be destroyed? Why on earth would he be doing that, and why would that be good news to them?
Well, it's good news for those who belong to Jesus' new kingdom, because Jesus is building something better. Jesus is building a temple that's available to all people without qualification. He's building a sacrifice as one. He's offering himself as a single sacrifice for all people, no more need for continuous sacrifices. He is building a brand new religious order in himself that's orders of magnitude better than the one they've experienced before. And as we hinted at yesterday, this new temple and this new sacrificial system is going to be built on the fact that Jesus must die first and then rise from the dead. And a resurrected Jesus is going to sit at the head of this new kingdom and this new religious order, which means it will be incorruptible. The old temple system run by humans is always going to be subject to some sort of chaos, some sort of disorder, some sort of injustice, something.
Right.
But because it's now in the resurrected, perfect God sitting at his right hand, nothing will be able to assail the church, God's complete people of all people, ever again.
Yeah.
It's an incorruptible thing.
Yeah. I also wonder too if there's something about the fruitfulness of the tree, because if they really did grab onto the metaphor that Jesus was pulling on and bringing into visual reality, they would have known, like, man, this has kind of always been a problem. We've always had a barren tree, a barren vine when it came to the temple. Then Jesus, what he's offering them is, like you've said, a new temple, but what he's offering them is a vine that will actually bear fruit. Like a way for them to be human again, a way for them to be God's people again. Oh, like if this fake Garden of Eden gets thrown into the chaos waters of Genesis 1,
that's right.
I'm going to bring something new out of it, a new Garden of Eden, where I'm going to create a people who actually can be fruitful and multiply, where you're going to have a leaf, and fruit.
Yeah.
And your roots are going to go deep because they're going to be in me. And it's like, I wonder if they're picking up on this new humanity kind of idea that if we want to be fruitful, we can't be attached to this tree anymore. We need our roots to be in new soil, which is in Jesus.
I don't know if they got it until after Jesus rose from the dead.
Sure. Right.
But I think that does begin.
Well, they didn't know that he was going to be the new temple until he rose from the dead either.
Right. So they didn't know.
They weren't getting any of this.
They were just we're like
they were just like, weird. What a weird miracle.
But yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Because of the way the resurrection story ends with Jesus rising from the dead and sending out his disciples to go forth, increase and multiply, make disciples of all nations. Right.
Yep.
So like that is the way Holy Week ends, is with a resurrected Jesus telling his disciples to go make disciples of all nations, not based on sex or procreation, but the proclamation that Jesus is risen from the dead and is king over all things.
A new commission to be fruitful and multiply.
That's right.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So why is the cursing of the fig tree good news for us today?
Yes.
Like, why should I be excited to celebrate Holy Tuesday today, other than the fact that maybe I understand this weird story a little better?
Yes. I mean, the good news is that, like the disciples, we are invited into a new era in which the old religious institution of perpetual sacrifices, incomplete atonement, is replaced by perfect atonement, perfect sacrifices, and incorruptible people of God.
Yeah.
That can no longer be overthrown by corrupt actors, but is headed by Jesus Christ himself.
Yeah.
This is what Jesus tells Peter. He's like, the gates of hell will never
overcome.
Will never overcome, will never conquer the rebellion you are now leading.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what I'm creating after the temple will be orders of magnitude greater, unable to be conquered by a Roman force in AD 70, unable to be undone by malicious actors, abusive priests. No, I'm building something brand new that's not physically located, but spiritual, not of this earth.
Yeah.
And last forever.
I think another way to think about this too is we've been talking a lot about like, okay, with the old tree gone, let's talk about the new tree.
Yeah.
But also like there's good news in the fact that that old tree was cursed. Like that Jesus holds corrupt religious institutions responsible.
That's right.
Like that.
That's right.
That people who claim his name but don't do his works, right? Don't get off scot-free.
That's right.
That they're actually held responsible.
They're held responsible.
And that God will judge his church.
That's right.
His people. His people.
Yes.
And those, who are listening, who have been hurt by religious institutions that claim the name of Jesus.
Right.
They don't get a free pass. Like
they don't.
If they are a fruitless tree, they will be judged too. And like that can be really good news for people who have been wounded by those institutions.
That's right. We have biblical command to pray for the destruction of corrupt institutions as they exist today.
Right.
In hopes of being part of a new and better, more Jesus honoring, Christ exalting institution that is indestructible. It loves God and loves people well.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that's Jesus cursing the fig tree.
That's Jesus cursing the fig tree.
All right. What's tomorrow?
Well, after this whole incident with the cursing of the fig trees, the opposition between Jesus and the religious establishment continues to escalate, almost as if they are hearing what Jesus is saying about the fig tree and picking up on it. One of the parables Jesus says just after this is about a corrupt group of vineyard owners who are killing prophets. And they get that one, like, oh, you think we are the fruitless fig tree or the corrupt vineyard owners killing people. So they're recognizing that Jesus is saying all these things with the intention of ousting them from their power. And so they're going to continue to find ways to kill Jesus. And tomorrow we will figure out that they're going to recruit Judas to their side.
Yeah. So the betrayal or the recruitment of Judas and the anointing of Jesus by the woman with perfume.
That's right.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
Big day.
Big day.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us on this Holy Tuesday, and we will see you tomorrow for Holy Wednesday or Spy Wednesday,
right.
however you want to call it. We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the Spoken Gospel Podcast. Spoken Gospel creates short films, devotionals, and podcasts like this one. Everything we make is free because of generous supporters like you. To see our resources, visit spokengospel.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. See you next time.